For this lesson, I want to talk about drop 2 and drop 3 voicings on guitar. Those are kind of your fundamental jazz guitar voicings that every guitar player should learn if they're trying to play jazz. And if you're like me, when you first started learning jazz chords on guitar, I would just learn 2, 3, maybe 4 different voicings or grips for each type of guitar chord that I wanted. So for example, if I wanted C major 7th, I knew this one, and this one, you know, maybe 1 or 2 other ones, but that was basically how I first started learning jazz guitar chords, was just learning, you know, 2 or 3, 4 different grips for each one. And I wished I would have started with a more holistic, fundamental approach and learned them, you know, much more systematically, because it, you know, it created gaps in my playing later that I later realized I needed to go back. So that's why I'm talking about drop 2s and drop 3s. And what I've done is come up with this little system to systematically learn all of your essential drop 2 and drop 3 voicings on guitar and all the different inversions. And it turns out that there's 100 of the basic ones that I'm coming up with this system. And how I arrive at that is, if you take, you know, your basic drop 2 voicing, which on guitar there's 3 different string sets for drop 2. There's 6, 5, 4, 3, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, or 4, 3, 2, 1. Drop 2s, there's 2 different string sets, 6, 4, 3, 2, and 5, 3, 2, 1. So that's 5 different string sets, 4 different inversions for each type of chord. So that's 20 different voicings for any given chord. So if you have C major 7, there's 20 different drop 2 or drop 3 voicings on guitar. Then I'm going to systematically go through all the essential ones, which are major 7th, dominant 7th, major 6th, or minor 7th, depending on what you're thinking of as the bass, minor 6th, or minor 7th flat 5, depending on what you're thinking of as the bass, and diminished. So that's 5 essential types. So if you multiply 20 times 5, you arrive at 100 different essential drop 2 and drop 3 voicings. That's my little system that I'm going to run through real quick and show them to you in as short amount of time as possible. But I also want to talk a little bit about, you know, how drop 2 and drop 3s are structured. Drop 2s, the 5th, the root and the 5th, and the 3rd and the 7th kind of stay together. So like for that root position one, it's 1, 5, 7, 3. The second inversion is 3, 7, 1, 5. So the root and the 5th are either together on the bottom and the 3rd and the 7th on top, or they switch on some of the inversions. With drop 3s, the root and the 5th are either on the outside, like that root position is 1, 7, 3, 5, or they're on the inside, 3, 1, 5, 7, and the 7th and the 3rd are on the outside. So they kind of switch. Either the root and the 5th are on the outside and the 3rd and the 7th are in the middle, or vice versa, like that, which is interesting, just something to note about the structure. So I'm going to run through all 100 of the voicings. I'll show you how my little system works that I came up with, and then I'll talk to you about, you know, some ways to practice drop 2 and 3s and some ways to apply them, stuff like that. So let's run through the system. I'm going to do drop 2s first, and I'm just going to run through all the basic ones. You may find some of the fingerings kind of impractical. You know, everybody's hands are different, but I'm just going to give you the basic ones that I think everybody should try to learn, and then you can go through and decide which ones, you know, aren't practical fingering wise or even sound wise, you know, if you don't find them practical to use in playing situations. That's really, to me, up to the individual. So let me just run through this system for you. So we're starting with drop 2s on this string set, which is 6, 5, 4, 3. And just to keep it simple, I'm going to start everything in root position, so therefore this one is in the key of G. So you got your root position, then you take it to your first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. Now to go to dominant, you just take your major 7th interval and bring it down to the flat 7th in each one of those inversions. So you take that F sharp down to F in that key. And there's all your dominant inversions. Now to get to the next one, you just keep going with that, take that flat 7 down to 6, and you get major 6th or minor 7th. If you're in that particular key, G, if you're thinking of that as root position, that's a G major 6. It can also be called an E minor 7th. So you're learning, voicings for 2 different types of chords. Really, you can think of any of these voicings or grips as a multitude of different chords depending on what you're thinking of as the root note. But that one's real common as a major 6 voicing or a minor 7th. So then your second inversion, take that dominant down to 6th, same thing. Going to minor 6th, and to do that you just take the 3rd B in that key down to B flat. So that's G minor 6th or E minor 7th flat 5, and do the same thing with each one of those. Take that B down to B flat. The last one is just making it diminished, and diminished is symmetrical, so it's going to be the same grip all on each inversion, but you're just taking that 5th down, D down to D flat in that key. That's it for that string set. The next one is the 5, 4, 3, 2 string set, which we're going to do in the key of C to keep it in starting on root position. So again, major 7th, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. And make it dominant. Take the 7th down to the flat 7th. Major 6th or minor 7th. So that's C major 6th or A minor 7th. And make it minor 6th. So C minor 6th or A minor 7th flat 5. Taking that E down to E flat and all those voicings. And then make it diminish by taking the 5th G down to F sharp in each voicing. So that's that string set. Then you got your 4, 3, 2, 1 string set, which is key of F if you want to keep it in root position. F major 7th, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. And make it dominant. Take the 7th E down to E flat, the flat seventh, and each one of those. And take it again, down another half step from the flat seventh to the sixth, F major sixth or D minor seventh. Third, the A down to A flat, F minor sixth or D minor seventh flat five. And then diminish, taking the fifth, C down to B. There's all your drop twos. Let's move on to drop threes. The first one is the 6-4-3-2 string set. Again, we're in G to keep it in root position. So that first one, G major seventh, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. And then make it dominant. Take the seventh down to F, F sharp down to F in that key. First inversion. Second inversion, third inversion, whoops, and make it major sixth, so that's G major sixth or E minor seventh. Whoops. Make it minor sixth, or flat minor seventh flat five, G minor sixth or E minor seventh flat five. You're making that B down to B flat. Diminish, so you're just taking the fifth D down to D flat. And then the last one is again drop three. The string set is 5-3-2-1. Major seventh, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. Dominant. Just taking the major seventh down to the flat seventh in each one of those. And make it major sixth or minor seventh. So that's C major sixth or A minor seventh. Sorry about that. Now make it minor sixth, taking the third E down to E flat. So that's C minor sixth or A minor seventh flat five. Whoops. Take the fifth down to G down to F sharp in that key. So that's it. That's all your 100 essential drop 2 and drop 3 voicings. And I wished I would have learned it that way when I first started trying to play jazz. It would have made it much more holistic and, you know, given me a much better foundation for jazz guitar chords if I would have started with it that way. So if you're like me and you didn't learn it that way from the beginning, I highly recommend going back and looking at it like that in a systematic way, I think it'll open up the neck and in my opinion make you look at the harmony and stuff on guitar more like a pianist, and thinking about it in terms of note choice and sounds and stuff like that, instead of just thinking of it as grip. So I need E minor 7th flat 5, and you just go to your stock grip that you always play. You can think about it more like, I know 20 different voicings now for E minor 7th flat 5, and and when you think about it that way, it unlocks the neck a lot more, and you can think about it in terms of note choices and sounds and stuff like that, and not just grips that you have. So now I'm going to talk about some different ways to apply and practice drop 2 and drop 3s. You can look at them in 2-5-1s, either in major or minor, like those. What I was just showing you, that system. Like for example, we'll take C minor 6th, the inversions that I just showed you. Now you can look at that as a 2, so then it's a A minor 7th flat 5, and then make it diminished for a 2-5. So in that particular key, you're going to G. So 2-5, and then 1 is G minor. And then you can go up the inversions and do the same thing. So the next inversion. So now you have 20 different voicings for a 2-5-1 in G minor instead of 3 or 4 at the max, which is what I always had before. Now I have 20 different inversions for all that. You can do those for major 2-5s too. One way I like to do it is, like again, if you're in C, a 2-5-1 in C, take your D minor 7th standard voicing that everybody knows and just drop that 7th down and make it D minor 6. You can also think of that as a G dominant 9th with no root in it. The A is replacing the root, the 9th, and just take those up the inversions. Take your next D minor 7th inversion and just do the same thing. Another voicing for 2-5-1. So now you got 20 more voicings for 2-5-1 in C major, and that's without any extensions or alterations or anything like that. That's just your stock basic drop 2 voicings. So there's a way you can do it. You can also start taking those drop 2s and drop 3s up scales, your major scale. Minor scale. Those have some different voicings than the stock ones that I just showed you. So you can do that, take them up scales. That's a real good way to also learn, take one of your voicings that you play and take it up a scale, up the major scale or up a melodic minor scale, and you'll get all these new voicings that you didn't know out of the one voicing that you want. You can do that with inversions too. Let's take that basic C major 7th drop 2, but make it a sharp 11. Drop the G down to F sharp, and then play those inversions. That's giving me some voicings for C major 7 sharp 11 that I would have never thought of before. So that's a good way to get some new voicings in your repertoire. Take a basic drop 2, put a color, change one of the notes, substitute, for the fifth on that one, the sharp 11, and then take it up the inversions or up a scale, and you're going to generate all these different voicings that you may recognize it as something, you knew it as something else, like that one for a C major 7 sharp 11. I knew that as a F sharp half diminished type voicing. I would have never have thought of that as a C major 7 sharp 11 with the sharp 11 in the bass. So it just gives you interesting ways to think about stuff. There's also the kind of the Barry Harris school of thought, and that's where you're putting diminished chords in between all of the inversions, and he specifically does that with 6 chords, but you can do it with any of them, but they work really well with the 6 chords. So for example, if you've got C major 6, you take a diminished chord and put it in between each inversion. Works really well, kind of like passing diminished chords. You can do it in minor as well. Minor 6, C minor 6, D diminished, C minor 6, F diminished, C minor 6, A flat diminished, C minor 6, B diminished. And that's another cool way to do all that stuff. If you listen to Joe Pass and Wes Montgomery, they're doing that, probably not thinking about it like that theoretically, but you'll see them just as passing diminished chords, putting those diminished chords in between inversions of minor 7th, major 7th chords, stuff like that. What else can you do with it? That's really the ways that I use them. So that's at least some ways to get started. And of course, I've only given them to you in one key really for each one, so you have to start learning them in all 12 keys as well, which takes time. But I would start with just those starting in the root positions, so you can just get the basic structures down, and then start moving them into different keys. Let's say key of D flat major, drop 3. So you just want to be able to, anywhere on the neck, you see a chord or whatever on a tune, and you're just able to grab the closest, and there's also the I'm thinking of the Mick Goodrick, those Guitar Almanac books where he has all those voice leading exercises with triads, root position, drop 2 and drop 3 voicings, moving through different types of diatonic progressions in fourths, fifths, and thirds. And those are really good for working on all those different inversions and voicings and voice leading them through different types of progressions. So I highly recommend those books, although I think they're out of print now, but you could probably find some of that stuff online. Those are really good. So that's basically enough to get you started. It's definitely enough for me to work on, but I highly recommend doing this, going back and systematically learning your drop 2 and drop 3s, and having your harmonic foundation on guitar be much more holistic and solid.